Hey guys, what's going on? Sorry for the late video. I am trying to get back onto the rhythm of publishing videos. Have been losing a bit of motivation in the game a little bit, which has sparked up again actually, so it's positive, and just been working a shit ton. So now that kind of life's in a better spot in terms of work-life balance for the moment, we will be trying to push forward and publish more videos. So today we're looking at the top 10 most popular comps in threes. These are things you should know what they do, what their win conditions are, and how to beat them for your comp. Especially if you're pushing Gladiator for the first time or pushing a new rating goal. So if you have an organized team, it's probably worth showing them this video or showing them this link from Ludus Labs, which is in the description, and talking about how do we beat this comp, how do we beat this comp. What's our win condition? Because you're going to see these comps the most often out of almost anything. And I think from my experience as well, I largely see the same sort of percentage breakdown as well. So first thing with RMP, to understand how RMP works, Rogue Mage has kind of worked the same for like how since TBC. They stun something, they try and get a cooldown early from you in their opener because it can have a really hard opener with Invis. They CC the other two targets, and then once you trinket or use a cooldown, they'll try and reset. They'll try and do it again when they have their cooldowns back up, and then their offensive cooldowns are rotating faster than your defensive cooldowns are. And if you aren't successful in keeping, in either putting enough pressure on the priest or the mage to force the rogue to come and peel, or just doing enough damage in general, what they'll do is they'll just keep resetting on you, and eventually you run out of defensive cooldowns for their goes. They're generally going to be strong into these types of comps, right? Where there's not like an easy shutdown for what they do. There's no purges on a lot of these comps except for the Shadow Priest comp, because I think the majority of these are actually played with like paladins, or even if they're played with a priest, the priest is probably going to be CC'd during the combustion. Um, Especially when you see these comps like Rogue Mage against Windwalkers, or even just Rets, squishy targets like that. The Mind Games in combination with the Rogue's Burst, and then the Combustion and the Mind Games, because it's a minute cooldown on the second set of Burst, really means that you can get a huge amount of cooldowns out straight away. Against something like Shadowplay or Shadow Priest Warrior, these types of comps, these are really sturdy comps. They can live for ages and peel really hard. So Warlocks can run the instant fear. Both everybody on that team has access to the gate. They have access to health stones, and priests have a really hard time healing through Aflock Shadow Priest. So all you need to do is land a single stun Mind Games with UA on it, and it's really big trouble for the priest. He's going to have to burn huge amounts of mana, which is one of the weakest points of RMP, is that they're very mana dependent. They have really good CC, and the priest, when he has mana, can keep these two guys up pretty well. But that's like a 3-minute timer, and if you're doing huge damage, they can go faster than that. So you still want to be aggressive. Like, that's the biggest thing I would recommend anyone playing out against RMP. When their go is over, like when you guys are on diminishing returns, you guys need to play aggressive. If you're playing scared, they will just reset and kill you again. Looking at Turbo, Turbo is another very popular comp. This is something where the Shaman, provides Bloodlust to the Warrior, provides huge off healing, grounding, and shear, and the Warrior just does a lot of does a lot of, like, can intervene. The Shaman can kind of make up for that, and the Paladin in that comp can provide that instant CC, the oh shit button with sacks and bops and bubbles. So huge amount of utility coming out there. They're very strong into these kind of squishier comps that aren't able to kind of play as aggressive as them. So something like Aflock Elisham, they can shear, like essentially the Elisham can only stun the Enhancement Shaman, because this can get instantly sheared if he's casting it. The Lock is going to have a hard time kiting and living through the Shaman's burst. So if they can go either of these targets and be quite successful. Hexes from the Shaman can get instantly dispelled by the Enhancement Shaman, and the Warrior can just put out consistent dam to sort of force them down. Things like God Comp, Turbo, I wouldn't say at higher ratings it's like this. I think it's probably more fit even at higher ratings. But at lower ratings, these guys have a really hard time living with the burst and the amount of purges. and pretty much all these comps where they're feeling a bit squishier than normal, and they don't have sort of like a big turnaround. What they're weak into. So Demon Hunter, Warrior, I'd say that's largely true. I think Demon Hunters can kite a lot better than an Enhancement Shaman can. And it still has the setup. On the Ascendants, they can throw the darkness down and blur. They can kind of extend that game out and push really, really hard with the hunt and damage onto either the warrior or the shaman. Kitty Cleave, very similar, and TSG, the Frost DK comps are very strong into it as well, with the double blinds. Chill Streak on 2 DPS is killer, and it's really, really hard to recover from that. So Ret Warrior is next. Ret Warrior is something that is super, super high burst, but also runs out of steam pretty quickly once a priest is in. You'll see this being played with a Holy Priest as well, and there's a few key differences here. So with a Disc Priest, these guys feel very, very tanky for 30 minutes because the priest is using these big cooldowns and keeping them up with big radiances as well. With a Holy Priest, and that's largely because the Disc Priest kit is a lot more damage mitigation. So things like Dome, things like PS, all this kind of stuff. Whereas the Holy Priest is more like mana efficient throughput, which will be around in the game a lot longer than your Disc Priest will, but it does change how you play against them. If you're playing against a Disc Priest, you can this team. If you're playing a Holy Priest, you should probably try and work out what your other windows are. So these guys do a massive burst, and they're very good at killing Windwalkers. So if you watch any of my stream when I was playing this earlier in the season, you could just one-shot Windwalkers really quickly. It's quite good into Turbo. I wouldn't say it's the best into Turbo, but I think the Ret can really force so many cooldowns out of both of these guys. And you can just force the shaman to have to run around while your priest is, either drinking or recovering. They can't really fully commit onto your priest as well because you have a huge amount of like peeling opportunities with intervene, bop, all this kind of good stuff. So what are they worst into? They are worst into God Comp. This makes a lot of sense. They can set up with the mind games onto the Ret. They can poly the warrior, and they can fear or use a hodge on the healer, and they can do these massive combustion goes that essentially forces the Ret or the Disc Priest to use a cooldown, and they just have to do that 2 or 3 times and you lose. Similar with a lot of these caster comps, they can sort of drag the game out more. There's not enough data for these last two, so I'm not going to talk too much about them, but I think TSG is quite good into it as well when I've played it. As long as the TSG can live through the Ret's burst, the Ret Warrior will usually fall over because the priest has no easy way to get out there without committing trinkets on the sleet. The warrior can cleave all of them and kind of sit in B stance a lot more and be aggressive instead of having to spam intervene the Ret. So TSG is a phenomenal comp, probably one of my favorite comps of all time. If there is any high-rated DKs that want to play with me, hit me up. It's a really, really fun comp because you have the ability to control the game. You can play defensive, or you can play super, super aggressive, or you can kind of just react. It's go based, but it also has high consistent damage. So you have these 1 minute grip in sleep goes where you can do huge bursts onto one target, or you can try and cleave down the whole team. You're quite resilient and tanky. The DK can provide AMZ, the zone. The paladin or whatever healer you have can rotate nicely with that, so you can hold trinkets if it's AMZ. The DK is kind of hard to kill, warriors are hard to kill, etc., etc. Chains of ice on every target means melee have a hard time running down the healer as well. So they're very good into other cleaves and a lot of caster melee teams. And these are obviously popular caster melee teams, but I would say generally caster melee teams are quite weak into TSG because the warrior or the melee has to hit one of these usually. And then they're hitting the Shadow Priest, so they instantly get a double cleave on these two targets. They're also good into other cleaves, into shutting down a lot of the other cleaves because you get a big sleet on 2. You're able to force the cleave to play defensive or even split. And if a cleave is splitting, then usually MS isn't on one target that's getting hit by the other guy. It's a bit easier to heal through. they're weaker into these caster comms because the casters can essentially form a nice 40-yard triangle, make it really hard for the DK and the warrior to really get a go going. So then they'll have to rely on just doing consistent damage, which these guys are usually a little bit better at, considering that they have locks and Ellies and Shadow Priests and stuff that can really force a lot. And then looking at Warrior Mage Paladin, this is the comp I played up until about 3.1 KMMR earlier this season, and this is a really, really fun comp. It's very, very bursty, and you're looking to essentially, set up a CC, do your big go, do some consistent damage, peel for the mage, set up the next CC go. It goes on and on and on, right? You're going to be strung into a lot of cleaves, which don't have an easy way to shut your mage down, or a purge. And you're going to be strong into RMP as well. What you are going to be weak into is these DK boomkin comps, because the mage can't CC this druid. The druid's going to be running around, spamming cyclones. You're going to have a hard time into the ret DK. This is what I felt like was the hardest to verse. This didn't feel too bad, the DK druid. It was annoying, but the Frost DK ret felt really, really hard to deal with because they'd just run down our healer and we couldn't really stop them without dying ourselves. And then this, we talked about Turbo before. This is just Turbo with Disc Priest, and then Shadow Play. So Shadow Play is an interesting one. Shadow Play kind of revolves around having UA on all these targets. The Shadow Priest usually stuns the healer and puts mind games on them, which creates a huge amount of pressure because the healer can't dispel the mind games without dying, because the UA silence might hit like 15k and finish him off. Everyone's rotting in this comp, and they're just going to be trying to kite and live. Obviously, it seems like we don't have too much data for them, but they are strong. Well, the Holy Pally variant is strong into other variants of it, which makes sense because I think Holy Pally is probably the best healer for this, or maybe Resto Druid as well. They're strong into TSG, and the rest of the data, I think, we talked about how they're strong into RMP as well, and they're quite weak into these like kind of warrior priest, warrior shaman, something with like purges and stops. They're going to be strong into stuff that can't generally purge because you want to be able to stop this Dark Soul. So that's generally the big condition from their comp, is just setting up these massive goes. So you should really be looking to stop that critical mind games there. So guys, I'm going to be talking more about win conditions, which is the subject of next video, or maybe it'll be earlier. I'll decide. And we're going to be talking about why and how to break down and understand a win condition and apply it to your own gameplay, because I think it's really, really important to understand and learn. I hope you guys enjoy these videos, guys. Please, if you are interested in any one-on-one coaching, check out the Patreon. We have some lessons available for you guys. We're working on something in the background too. On the coaching front, I hope you guys are staying motivated as well to keep playing. It's been pretty rough. I think morale is probably at a kind of low because, the game feels a bit stagnant. It feels like Blizzard really isn't interested in listening to what, people in the community want the game to be. So stay positive, try your best to get your rating goals, take a break here and there, because I think this season's going to be around for a while. So rest, recover, come back to the game in 2 or 3 weeks. It's still going to be there if you feel like you aren't super enjoying it at the moment, because usually that actually also improves your gameplay too. All right, guys, take it easy. Peace out.